we're under attack. And they're going to come for one, they're going to come for us all. Injustice to one is injustice to all. And the thing is, they're not going to come for, like, of course they're coming for all of us, but when they're targeting folks, sometimes they're not going to target, some grand, like they're not going to target maybe Randy Weingarten first. They'll target somebody that nobody knows, that, we need to show up in solidarity for everybody.
Welcome to Fight Back Radio, a production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and today we're going to be talking about the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and their crazy, reckless cuts to the federal government workforce and many vitally needed services for working class people of the United States. And our guest, we're lucky today to have our guest, Loreen Targos, who's the Executive Vice President of the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 704. And she's also a scientist who works for the Environmental Protection Agency. So welcome to Fight Back Radio, Loreen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Well, I want to start out by talking a little bit about your agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, and what have these cuts looked like for your people? I know I did a little quick research. Your agency was started in 1970 by Richard Nixon, that radical left-wing president that we had. That's sarcasm, but it was to protect air, water, manage waste, and to safeguard quality of life and public health. And it talks about those kind of things on the website even today. And so could you talk a little bit about the things that that the EPA does and how these cuts are affecting you?
Something that's been kind of resonating with me more recently is how perspectives change so much over history. And when you mentioned, how we were founded and stuff, it kind of brought me back to what I've read was sort of the culture before the Environmental Protection Agency started. The reason the EPA started was part of the political momentum for it was when the Cuyahoga River in Ohio caught on fire multiple times. Before that, I think some people would see oil sheens on their bodies of water where their drinking sources were, and they would almost see it as a sign of progress, as a sign of jobs or something. It wasn't a big alarming thing like we might think of today. And as I think about all the other things that the Trump regime has been doing across our government, trying to bring us back to a time when the Confederacy was in charge. And we've seen these rises and falls of like systemic white supremacy over our country's history. I see this, the rollback of the work of the Environmental Protection Agency hand in hand with all of that. They want to bring us back to a time in their work with the Environmental Protection Agency and dismantling it. They want to bring us back to a time when, rampant cancer and respiratory problems and contaminated water was just a part of American life that was tolerated by the people. And because of the great work of my colleagues that came before me at particularly the Environmental Protection Agency Region 5's Great Lakes office, because of the work of those amazing scientists and attorneys and staff who did clean up the Rust Belt in a way that has transformed the air quality and the water quality and the soil quality of our area. They really want to bring us back to a time and want the American people to forget that we deserve clean air and clean water, just like they want the American people to forget that equity and equality and diversity and inclusion are really very great values that were brought to us by the courageous leaders of civil rights movements. So all of this, I think, as a worker, has helped clarify to me how the working class will be able to stand together, what solidarity actually looks like. And the Environmental Protection Agency's work is so critical in the American values that we're trying to hold up of, justice and liberty for all people.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, let me do a little follow up here though. So I mean, you're speaking today as a officer of the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 704, and not for the EPA. So there's our disclaimer. But you are a scientist and somebody who has worked on with the Great Lakes Project, as you mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about what if we go back to those days, the good old days, making America great again? I mean, I think it means what, more cancer, dirtier water, from the air, things like that. What is this? What does this actually mean in terms of people's lives, and what kinds of things could this mean for our families?
Well, the way I sort of explain it is that the Protection Agency prevents tragedies and responds to tragedies. And we see that in our disaster response work. For example, when there was a disaster in East Palestine, we saw a combination of all sorts of different chemicals that we don't have a record of being mixed together before. And they blew up and went all over town, engulfed in flames. And our on-scene coordinators were there in person, responding to that very quickly, and they stayed there over a very long, extended period of time. One of the resources that we had also in the Environmental Protection Agency was our research office. The research office that the Trump regime is shutting down. He has successfully shut it down. And for an emergency like that, and this could happen anywhere in the country where railroads exist or highways exist or any sort of things that are toxic to human life and human health are transported or held. And so if those things are to get out and mix and that sort of thing, a lot of novel things happen when you say, wow, all the frogs are dead, or, all the fish are dead, or I smell something that smells really unusual in my area. We had experts at the Office of Research that would be able to look at the science and apply their very deep knowledge of how chemicals interact with each other and with the environment, and are able to propose ways to address that and that are most protective to human health to the best knowledge that we have in science. And every single day that the Trump regime moves forward in dismantling our agency, we have less access to that technical capability that we need to protect people, especially in the cases of disasters. And then also we have cases like Flint, where, of course, the Environmental Protection Agency has things to be accountable for and their role in that. But how it should happen is that your state or your local municipality is responsible for providing you uncontaminated, clean drinking water. And when they fail at that, the Environmental Protection Agency is the person the institution who steps in and intervenes. Now, in the case of Flint, they intervened too slow, a critic might say. And so the rapidness of that response is something that we can discuss, but there was a response. And now we're getting into a place where there may not be a response. There may not be an accountability factor. And that's just for, government providers of clean drinking water. That's not even going into companies that actually pollute every single day and are held to stringent standards to protect the human health environment in their vicinity, that are now already getting the message that no one's coming to see if you're actually following the rules to protect the human health and environment in your vicinity. And therefore, you can go back to the grand old days when, you could pollute to the extent where a river could catch on fire.
Yeah, no, that's thank you for that. And it's yeah, I mean, I think we can make the argument that rather than laying off, we should be hiring a lot more people and having more stringent standards. And Flint, Michigan is certainly a good example where you had a declining industrial city that was actually I think their local water was taken over by the state, if I'm correct, and with the right-wing government, they just let it go and. The next thing you knew, you had unhealth, things that could harm you that in your drinking water in your regular situation. And so, yes, I mean, clearly, working class people across our country need things like the EPA. So thank you for that. Um, Let me ask though about your union, the American Federation of Government Employees. There's and it's we'll get into other agencies too eventually here, but I want to focus. We start out by focusing on what your agency, but the layoffs of the researchers and everybody else across the country have been challenged in court, and there's been some success in those challenges. And then now Trump has just made an executive order. Tell me if I'm right here. My understanding is that some of the success in the court was because of the collective bargaining agreement lays out and gives certain rights. So the fact that the union has over the years been able to establish rights in their contracts, they use that to fight the layoffs and some of the dismantling by DOGE and the Trump Musk group. And now they're trying to say, well, this is a national emergency, so we don't want to have unions in the federal sector. First, is that correct? And then secondly, could you elaborate a little bit on this and how this actually worked and walk us through it a little bit?
Right. You know, the only national emergency is that the Trump regime is, dismantling every protection for the quality of life for working people in this country and destroying our economy and all sorts of other important things in the process. For this executive order that he put forth, how that will work in actuality is, the president will put forward an executive order. And my understanding is the Office of Personnel Management will actually have their attorneys or
That's like the Human Resources
the
Department for
human
the federal
resources for the
workers.
federal government. They'll
Yeah.
go and sort of interpret it and give that order down to all the executive agencies, like the Environmental Protection Agency. And then our top people at the Environmental Protection Agency will decide how to take that guidance and implement it. So then our union president will get a call and say, you are now kicked out of your office. You are now not allowed to file a grievance. You are now not allowed to use official time to counsel somebody who wants to file a grievance or has some sort of issue that they need help with mediation. Those are all ways that the workers will be undermined in actuality. So for example, one of the things that we've been really proud of is our union bargained for the common good when we last bargained our contract under the Biden administration. We added an article demanding scientific integrity. So if a scientist like myself received an order to do something that violates scientific integrity of my work, let's say I have some set of data that says, if we add one more drop of oil into, or one more speck of pollution into this area, then, it will harm the health of 1 million people. And so by law, according to whatever Clean Water Act or Clean Air Act, I can say that there cannot be another permit issued for a polluter in this area, let's say. And I don't do this type of work in my position. I'm just giving a hypothetical.
Sure. Yeah.
As a person who's never done permits. So if my management or if a political appointee came down and said, no, I'm going to overrule you, even if it doesn't reflect what the science says and they can't provide science that supports what they do, I could go with my union and file a grievance and say they're violating, the scientific integrity of the work that I do. This executive order will likely take away my ability to do that through my contract. And so it's just another way they're undermining democracy in the workplace, democracy in our country, and taking the voice away from ordinary people who will, raise a red flag about a problem. And they want to take it up to the top and allow the elites to do whatever they want and have no pushback.
Yeah. So let me follow up on that a little bit. So first, let me just say, bargaining for the common good is a concept for our Fight Back Radio listeners that is started to take hold in some of the more progressive labor unions in the country. That says we need to bargain not only for bread and butter, wages, benefits for ourselves, but we need to look for the good of our communities. We live in cities, states, and in a country, and we have neighbors, and we want to look out for the common good of everybody. And as an organized force, organized labor has an ability to win things for our communities that others can't. And so, I have my most recent background has been in the teachers union, and that's a concept the Chicago Teachers Union has taken under consideration too. And so when you argue for certain things for your students, for example, it's maybe it doesn't benefit you economically, but it's good for our whole city to have educated students that are healthy, et cetera. But I want to follow up also about the grievance procedure. So for people that aren't in the union, if there's, typically, like in the old days, back in the 30s, 1930s, whatever, if there was a grievance or a violation of the contract, the workers might just, whatever, set down their tools or go on strike or do slow down or whatever. But the most contracts in the United States strictly forbid that now. And so during the life of the contract, so it's difficult. So the way things are resolved typically are through a grievance procedure. And so if there's a contract in place and it's violated, there's a grievance procedure, and and could you talk a little bit about, in your example, what does it mean not to have a grievance procedure? And with a grievance procedure, how might things be resolved?
Right now, through the grievance procedure, before this executive order is implemented, we can file a grievance. The agency has to respond. If they do not respond affirmatively, if they don't say, "Oh my goodness, thank you for pointing this out. We are so sorry that we, violated your scientific integrity. Here, we're gonna go with your decision." And no problem. Oftentimes, you'll have to take it to a step 2 grievance, and it'll rise up to various authorities. I think for us, it would go to the Federal Labor Relations Board, and they might make a decision. And if we wouldn't agree with the decision, we could take it to an arbitrator. And an arbitrator would be an independent person that both parties agree to take on our dispute. And they would have the evidence presented on both sides, and they would make a decision, and we would be, both sides would be obligated to abide by that decision.
Yeah.
But
and
now
I'm
that
sorry, go
won't
ahead.
be an option. But
Yeah,
that won't be an option going forward, in which case we won't really have a grievance procedure. We will have to be more creative in how we express our grievances informally.
Yeah. No, this is significant because this is one of the most important things. I mean, even like a non-union company or place might have a grievance procedure, but it's usually a joke because at the end of the procedure, the boss decides. And here, as you pointed out, Loreen, at the end of your grievance procedure, most of them, there's an arbitration where a neutral person from the outside comes in and looks at both sides, would pick in a certain way, usually from an agency, federal mediation and conciliation or something like that. And so they have to follow the contract because there's something legally binding at the end. And so Without that, you wonder, what it's trying to, a lot of what DOGE is doing is just straight up union busting, I think, and going after a union that's, as because they're the federal government, Trump, that it's the closest one to them, and so this will affect all workers, and especially, union workers, I think. So yeah, thank you for that. Um, and it's something. I mean, I think the AFL-CIO executive committee has met on this, and there's been some calls, but I think it's something everybody needs to to support the AFGE workers, whether it's EPA or the Veterans Affairs or whatever, because this is going right at the heart of what our rights are as working class people. So sorry for the speech there,
Oh, that's
but
important. And
yeah.
I'm really appreciate how you're laying out some of this context. You know, Elon Musk's little project is he's both Trump and Musk are on record for a long time of being incredibly racist with the workers and the people who do labor for them, and incredibly anti-worker. And you can't have capitalism without racism because the working class has to stay divided. And so we got to keep thinking about how important it is for us to dismantle the historic ways that the ruling class has been able to divide us, and do the work within ourselves, within our unions, within our communities, to take away those tools from the ruling class so we actually have a chance at a future. The planet is climate change has not been on hold while we deal with this constitutional crisis that we're in. And ultimately, the stakes are continuing to get higher, and everybody hearing my voice has a role to play in it. There's a reason they spend so much money exposing us to propaganda and telling us what they think is possible. It's because we actually do have a tremendous amount of power if we recognize it and demand it. And so let's keep working together to figure that all out. The horizons must be imagined before they can be reached. And so we have a duty to work together, to dream together, and to scheme together, strategize together to get that future that we deserve, not the future that Musk and Trump have in store for us, which is to live under their boot and be happy and silent about it. That's not a future I
Thank
want. That's not a future I want for anybody who's listening.
that's beautiful. Thank you for that. And let me follow up on it though too, with the because you mentioned the racism of Musk and Trump, and some these collective bargaining agreements that they're throwing away have in them a clause that's all of them that's about racism, and about you won't discriminate against people based on race, religion, national, or whatever, all these things, and the protected classes, and sometimes more. Some unions have been able to get extend it beyond what federal or state classes are, and so being able to enforce that contract, file a grievance, often because a lot of our um, it's so hard to file federal lawsuits or whatever. It's like having a grievance procedure is a way to get this. And going back to Trump and Musk, their attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Could you talk a little bit about how that's looked in the federal sector, and in the EPA, and what kinds of things you're doing to fight um, to protect diversity, equity, inclusion, or basically to protect people's rights to be treated equally and have their humanity.
Right. Even before, under the Biden administration, diversity and equity inclusion has never gone far enough that it needs to. For example, if someone, comes out and says right to your face, a racial slur or something, you can do something. But oftentimes we'll see microaggressions or other types of ways that, disrespect and dehumanization is weaponized in more covert ways that can't be applied. And now they're sort of saying, well, that's untenable. We want to, they always say they want free speech. They want free speech to be able to use a slur to dehumanize a person who, is on the lower side of power in their little game here. So they want to be able to say words that are ableist, that are racist, that are sexist. That's what they're talking about when they're trying to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And we need to think about how we're going to push back. And so we're pushing back through a lot of the times organizing when we can through the courts, but the courts are not going to be what stops this ultimately. It has to be the people refusing to tolerate it. And so we got to continue to figure out what that looks like and provide a really strong response.
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems that Trump is bringing a lot of us together because there's so many attacks on so many people all at once. And you just mentioned diversity, equity, inclusion. It's like our labor unions and civil rights organizations and others. This is a basis because the attacks go across what our different interests are and who we are as people. But could you talk a little bit about your union's efforts to work with others around some of the attacks that are going on, and how you're trying to reach out about, because you're the point of the spear. I mean, it's like federal employees, probably immigrants and transgender people as well are being attacked the sharpest, the first. And so how are you reaching out to other unions or other organizations?
Even during the first Trump administration, the solidarity of other unions has been such a critical part of our own, liberation. During, for example, the government shutdown under Trump, I believe in 2019. Trump shut down the government for an extremely long time, about 30 days it may have been, and we don't have the right to strike. And so we weren't able to really do anything. We could have, you can always figure out something, but we weren't well organized enough to mount a fierce response, given the restrictions that we have of it being illegal to strike and other sorts of things like that. What happened was the flight attendants, Sarah Nelson, went on television and said, this month-long shutdown has been wildly dangerous, particularly for our industry and the flight attendants. Our air traffic controllers are essential workers, federal essential workers. So they are working, but they aren't being paid. And so they're having to take care of their families with no checks coming in while still going to work and being overworked like they already do. And so she said, this is unsafe for, we're not going to wait for a plane to crash for this to be, when we speak up. So she threatened to go on strike, and Trump blinked immediately and the shutdown was over by 24 hours later. That was incredibly powerful. And that's a really important lesson for us to learn. We weren't able to do something, but the flight attendants were able to shake this all-powerful quote unquote president. And that's something that we need to think about right now. How are we reaching out to not only, we've been doing a lot of work within AFGE and within other federal sectors. Something I want to give a major shout out to is the Federal Unionist Network. Fun, as we call ourselves. We're now on Slack, and I'm not that active in it as other folks are. There's a lot of chats to keep up with, but there are some tremendous leaders that are in that. This is a network that started actually under Biden. We were challenging Chuck Schumer for not appointing more decision makers, I believe, to the National Labor Relations Board or the Federal Relations Board. I'm not as well versed on it, but we were challenging Chuck Schumer for sort of obstructing what was really necessary to protect workers' rights on an important board. And ultimately, we weren't successful in that immediate campaign, but later on, we were able to implement some things. But I say that because we started this fight under Biden's administration because we knew that Biden wasn't doing enough to push back against the movement that allowed Trump to be born in the first place. And, I'm going to get off into a little tangent here because I hear so much about, People are really happy to see the leopards eating people's faces. I don't know if you've heard that term. When, say, a Trump supporter, gets deported or something, they go like, well, you get what you voted for. And I really want to encourage people to not go after the convenient fools who fell for Trump, or who, we were all in a system where, we tried to democratically push back for a wider social safety net under, for example, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders' campaign, twice mounted, was demanding that we take away the dire, poverty, despairing conditions of the working class that allowed fascism to rise. And if he had won, you would have taken the wind out of the sails of the organizing tactics of Trump's supporters, who say, oh, the billionaire elites of the Democratic Party are looking down their noses at you. They're all college educated, whatever. And we need to fight back, and we need to get our country back to the old mythical glory days. And that was enough of a scapegoat to win a majority of the voters who turned out for this particular election. And if we don't want this to happen again, if we don't want to keep going in a cycle where we have a centrist and then a fascist and then a centrist and a fascist until the fascist, does what they're trying to do right now, which is, do what all people, take us to a genocide. We're already having people disappeared. It's happening. The stakes are extremely high right now. And so we have to stop attacking each other and pointing out each other's flaws and, what we did, what we're going to do going forward to be united with people who are being oppressed by this person, regardless of if they made a mistake in the past. Of course, we have to be accountable for our choices and that sort of thing, but we also need to stop the disappearance of working people. We need to stop our water and our air being poisoned and cancer rates rising. We need to stop vaccines being taken away from our children. There are so many different fights, and we need to be clear about how fascism recruits and exploits our vulnerabilities as a society to grow, and hit in the root of that. Not so much say, oh, Trump is a boogeyman. The boogeyman will be attractive to people if they're already in a despairing state. So something that our union has been talking about and doing more of is, what are we doing to talk about anti-poverty and caring for people who, might not have a six-figure government job or something. We need to be in solidarity with every single working person who is suffering under this administration and administrations before, and build a movement that cannot be stopped.
Yes, well, I'm for that. Yes, I think that's exactly what is needed. We can put in the show notes the contact information for the Federal Unionist Network, and I know that that's open to people that are not federal employees. It is supporters as well, because I signed up for something on it myself. They had a recent webinar, and so we'd encourage people to get involved with that. And also, I know. I'll point out here, April 5th, which is right about the time this will be released. There's going to be a big protest in cities across the country. I encourage people to go to them. And then if that's too last minute, or after you've heard this episode, May 1st, everywhere in the world, there will be a protest or something, because it's International Workers' Day, and we're encouraging people to get involved to support federal employees. The immigrant rights movement has taken this day on in the United States as a day, since 2006, as a day where they stand up and fight for immigrant rights. So there'll be unions and immigrant rights organizations, as well as everybody else. It's like all the people fighting for equality and women's rights and trans rights and all that. I shouldn't start listing things because I'll forget a few, but every person that's facing some kind of oppression, we need you to be out there on May Day. And the period, May 1st through the 5th here in Chicago, we're going to be having events. So please turn out for those things. I want to circle back, if I can, Loreen, to some of the these, to the Environmental Protection Agency, though, and talk about we know that Trump got tens of millions of dollars from the oil and gas industry, and 250 million from Musk in his presidential run, and but I want to ask about these office closures that have happened. I mean, they've put forward a propaganda thing that says, these lazy federal workers, there's fat in the federal government, there's people aren't doing nothing. We got all these stay-at-home people, and we I had a RN from the Veterans Affairs Hospital on a few episodes ago, and they had, at that time, they were saying, oh, you got to answer these 5 questions about what do you do every week or something like that, or I forgot how it was, but it was it was insulting to people, but these office closures are I want to ask you about them, but also about some of the details of how the DOGE has worked. But these, the office closings seem to me to affect real people. And the people, whether they're working from home or not, were doing real work. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Right. And we've seen this, since the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, employers, landlords wanted to force people back into unsafe offices. And, the pandemic is still happening. There's still a lot of people sick out there. We still see a lot of illnesses and in childcare facilities and in schools. And so this is them trying to take the model employer, federal workers who have, decent rights and employee rights, and force them to go back into the office when, in fact, their own studies show that folks who were able to work from home, which was a pretty small percentage of the federal government, were performing at or higher productivity than they did before the pandemic. And so this was not an issue of productivity, of government waste. People were getting their work done. This is an issue of control, coercion, forcing people to take an unnecessary commute and spend time away from their families. And we're gonna go back into the office, and we're gonna do the same work really on Teams still, because we still have partners that we work with that aren't employees of the government agency that we work with. So we're still going to be doing plenty of video calls now from a uncomfortable chair, that rather than in an office that might be more tailored to ergonomic needs of every individual worker.
Yeah, yeah. Could you talk? Yeah, that's thank you for that. Could you talk a little bit about also, I want to look at the leadership of your agency, but I remember when they said, oh, you got to fill out these things. Some of the cabinet members who, pushed back a little bit or said, oh, yeah, that's everybody else, but not my folks. Or, they realized that having, whatever, an unelected person giving orders to them made them look bad, but also there was legal issues. But I wanted to ask you about Lee Zeldin, who's the Environmental Protection Agency's administrator, the top dog there. And he's not a household name like the Secretary of Defense or whatever. But could you talk a little bit about? I'm sure you're familiar with him because he's your boss. About how he's reacted to all of this, and how they've how EPA is, leadership has dealt with some of these things that have come down.
Yeah, with Zeldin, he agreed with the 5 points item. So it actually continued to this day to have to send the 5 points every week. A waste of the taxpayer dollar to send things to an unsecure email address about the duties of the government workforce. And that's something that we continue to be ordered to do. And so I've been continuing to do that. And in a greater sense, Administrator Zeldin was somebody who, in his earlier career as I believe he was a congressman from New York, was a pretty moderate Republican. as he might need to be elected as a moderate in New York. And now we've seen him, I think there was a quote of him saying, we are driving a dagger straight into the heart of the climate change religion, unleashing American energy and bringing back auto jobs to the US is the duty he believes the Environmental Protection Agency should take on. So in one breath, he says he wants us to abide by the legal acts that uphold our mission to protect human health and the environment. And then on the other hand, he wants us to pretend as though climate change is a religion, and when in fact it's a very clear number of, I was born when the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide was about 380, and now it's well over 400. And that's unprecedented in human history. And we're rapidly seeing things change in ways that are extremely unsafe. If you have a child, I'm almost 40 years old, and I will see horrible consequences of this in my lifetime if I'm fortunate to live longer. And kids are, you can't even anticipate what their lives will be like when they're my age or when they're even older. And we're already seeing the workers are impacted by this the most. For example, when there were tornadoes in Illinois, managers at an Amazon facility refused to allow workers to go home. And then a tornado tore through a warehouse and killed workers. This is affecting workers, and we need to, that climate change needs to be part of our conversations because it's going to affect us all.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yes, I agree with that. And could you talk a little bit about the role that some of the environmental groups have played in this? And there's the big ones like the Sierra Club and some of them, but also there's little climate groups in cities across the country that are doing different things, and all of this is needed. And I don't know, as you're, have you reached out to to work with some of these climate organizations, as a union or otherwise, and what's the potential for this coalition going forward?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of leadership from Sierra Club and a lot of these other organizations who have been stepping up. I've seen some statements of theirs in solidarity with the workers of AFGE 704 and Council 238, which is the bigger AFGE council that oversees all the local Environmental Protection Agency workers affiliated with AFGE across the country. We want to make sure that we continue to be building bridges. So a lot of we've seen obviously like a lot of people rising up and joining the union and becoming much more active in the union and learning how they can be spending their free time organizing, building relationships, building coalitions, so that we can come together and fight for something that didn't exist before, which is a more unified working class. So we are working to get some turnout for April 5th. We're also working on an Earth Day action to be announced. We're going to be doing some things around in downtown Chicago for that. So stay tuned. I think Earth Day is April 22nd. So if folks want to be involved with doing some demonstrating and organizing around Earth Day, please get into contact with us at Local 704. We'd love to be involved with you and, grow our coalition. And then another thing on the docket is, again, like you said, May 1st. We need to be connecting with workers across the world because the borders are artificial. These borders allow capital in, they just don't allow humans in. And that contradiction is what causes so many problems and allows scapegoating in our society. And we really need to be being in solidarity with every worker around the world because borders are artificial, serving the elites, and we need to think about what benefits us as workers and have conversations about what is a better system.
Yeah, no, that's good. I wanted to ask you, I want to follow up a little bit on some of this, working together stuff. I saw you speak, whatever, a week or two ago on a panel for Jobs with Justice here in Chicago. And I saw, along with There was a veteran on the panel and somebody who had benefited from the Veterans Affairs Office. And I wanted to ask about the different locals across the different agencies and the councils. I'm not real clear on how AFGE is set up, but have you been reaching out and trying to work together? And could you maybe highlight a little bit of some of what other federal work? We've talked a lot about the EPA rightfully here today, but there's a and I mean to give a plug here too. Our I think it was 2 episodes ago, Pat Kearns was on from the Veteran Affairs. He's a RN in Iowa City, Iowa, and it was an excellent episode. So if you haven't heard it, go back after finish listening to this one, then go back and listen to that one too, because he talked a lot about how this. These attacks affect veterans and their staff at the VA hospitals. But could you talk a little bit about, working together across agencies? And, I know people can get into their job and I'm, a scientist with the environment. What does it have to do with a housekeeper at a VA hospital or whatever? But sometimes attacks can bring people together. So how does that look in AFGE right now?
Yeah, we've been showing up for folks. I believe there was like a TSA action that some of our members showed up for. So we've been showing up for folks, and we've also been kind of talking together, strategizing. For example, yesterday, on Monday, the Department of Education employees in downtown Chicago who were fired had to come in and turn in their computers and pick up their things from their desks. And we participated in a clap out where some of our folks went down at they took a early lunch break or a coffee break and went out and held signs as they were leaving the building with all their things, throwing away lifelong careers and, feeling really devastated and sad to be separating from their missions, having, the Department of Education workers having, like, for example, the worker that I know personally who lives in my community, she did discrimination cases. And so if there was a situation in a school where a child was experiencing systemic discrimination, she'd be investigating that, holding powerful people accountable to make sure that the child wasn't being disenfranchised. Those cases were left, in a file cabinet or whatever DOGE was going to do with them. And, there's not going to be any recourse for the people that they were working with. And this person is just taking a long career that they performed exceptionally well in and having to leave that behind and find another way to provide for her family, while being heartbroken over the fact that this was a job that she was really devoted to, very mission driven, just like we are at EPA. And so all across the agency, we've seen that. One of the first groups that had their collective bargaining rights taken away was the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, at the airports. And so, those folks are already experiencing some things where, supervisors are being maybe, too hard or doing something to them that might have triggered a grievance before. They can't do grievances anymore. And so, I think a lot of people, when it finally hits you, you find that maybe there was some denial before that, like, oh, this isn't really happening. And then you lose your job, or somebody you love or somebody you work with isn't there anymore. And drip by drip, just like we're seeing, doctoral students and Fulbright scholars and professors being disappeared from our academic institutions. I mean, lots of bad things are happening. And again, the stakes are really high. Build relationships, strengthen your relationships that you already have, and let's keep talking about how we're going to build something to replace what's going on right now.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I mean, these are real people's lives, as you point out. And so, I appreciate that. And solidarity is so important. I mean, that's our weapon, I think. I mean, I want to ask also, just beyond AFGE, even reaching out to the labor movement. I mentioned earlier you spoke at the Jobs with Justice thing, which is a multi-union labor community organization. And I know Don VR was the host of it, was the secretary treasurer of the the Chicago Federation of Labor, and have you gotten support from the AFL-CIO, or the central labor bodies here in Chicago? It's the Chicago Federation of Labor, but every community has one, where different unions come together. And what does that look like? And how is how have other unions related to what's going on with you guys right now?
We definitely get a lot of messages of support. Chicago Federation of Labor has been a really strong stalwart and brought in all those other umbrellas like AFL-CIO. We've seen them also speaking on with the Federal Unionist Network. We just had an emergency organizing call this weekend over the executive order to take away all of our collective bargaining rights, and we saw Randy Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, was
My
also
union, yes. Thank you.
yes,
Proud union
also.
member here. But yeah,
Right, right,
I'm
right. And
sorry to
so
interrupt,
workers,
Lorraine.
yeah, right. Workers are coming together. We're under attack, and they're going to come for one. They're going to come for us all. Injustice to one is injustice to all. And the thing is, they're not going to come for, like, of course they're coming for all of us, but when they're targeting folks, sometimes they're not going to target, some grand, like they're not going to target maybe Randy Weingarten first. They'll target somebody that nobody knows, that, we need to show up in solidarity in for everybody right now.
Yeah.
And
No,
so, yeah.
yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And yeah, thank you for that. Um, our time is starting to run out here, unfortunately. I want to thank you so much for being generous with your time here. But I want to, if there's anything that we haven't raised or any issues that you want to bring up for our Fight Back Radio listeners, please do.
Um, I just, thank everyone for everything they're doing, and be sure to take care of yourself. I mean, we have people in our union who, during the first Trump administration, when Trump took away our collective bargaining rights, they burned themselves out. um, like even physically, they were, becoming physically ill. And I've already heard of this happening to other folks right now. People are getting physically ill, mentally being triggered from what's happening with Trump, especially federal workers. They're, a lot of these people, played by the rules their whole life, and now they're having to face, possibly not being able to afford their housing and things that they never really imagined for themselves. And it's a important reminder that all of us are just one Trump regime or one illness away from, the most devastating and cruel consequences of capitalism, which is taking away things that we have a human right to, housing, education, uh, food, clothing. People are in really bad spots right now, and we need to recognize that our power is among ourselves. The master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. And so we can't go on and act like everything is normal. We need to talk to people that we didn't talk to 4 years ago, we didn't talk to 8 years ago, and do something different this time to fight back. Grow a bigger coalition. Who's missing here? Non-voters are often missing from these conversations. And, they know something that we don't about reaching out to people who might not have resonated with our messages last time. And I encourage everyone to go beyond the traditional networks that you organize in, and let's continue to build bridges. That's something we're trying to do with 704. We're trying to organize all across AFGE and then across every union. And then most people aren't in unions. So we need to talk to people who work but don't have union protections and find ways that our movement can bring them in and have something to offer them also. And, the more people that have a voice, the more people that will be invested in what we're building. So let's continue to open our ears up more than they've ever been open, put aside our egos, and be ready to learn.
That's a good finish. That's a good message for people. And I mean, the broadest solidarity, building a broad front against the Trump agenda is what's called for. So thank you so much for being our guest on Fight Back Radio, Loreen.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to the listeners who are all doing their part. We cannot do this alone, and I want to continue to be accountable to everybody, and vice versa. I'm love is what's going to do this. I feel so corny when I say that, and people might roll their eyes, but it's our love for each other that makes us do courageous things when we didn't expect to be able to do those things.
All right. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you, Loreen Targos, and I want to thank all the people, all the federal government employees who are going through so much strife right now, unnecessarily. The people that, like Loreen, who protect our air and our water, manage the waste, and as we face, whatever global warming and climate crises and, potential problems for the entire race. They're in the forefront of this. Physical scientists like Loreen Targos, and so I want to thank you, all of you, for all the work that you do. But it's not just thank you. It's not just empathy. We need to stand up and fight back, and like Fight Back Radio, the name of our show. But this is a serious time for us, and Loreen, tied. The struggles we're in to capitalism and this ever thirst for we need to consume and make profits no matter what it does to our environment, our planet, and to our health and to our families. And so thank you, Loreen, for all of that, and we appreciate it. But we're going to fight back, and we're going to fight back. I want to call out May 1st, International Workers' Day. Which is on a Thursday. Some places may celebrate it on the weekend. Here in Chicago, we're going to do May 1st through the 5th, which is Cinco de Mayo, which celebrates Mexico's fight for independence and against from the French, I think. Oh my God, I got to get my Cinco de Mayo stuff together. But anyways. I want to encourage people for May 1st, International Workers' Day, to attend the events in your area. If you're not sure what's going on in your area, send an email to me. I'll let you know. It's at richard.fightbackradio@gmail.com. And also I want to say that I mentioned this in the past episodes, but we're doing a fundraiser here in Chicago for Fight Back News, Fight Back Radio, and I know fundraisers are going on across the country for this. But please, we don't do the Patreon. We don't ask for money, but come out to this working class awards dinner. We're going to celebrate May Day. And I'm getting an award, the Pete Camerata Lifetime Achievement Award. I'd like to meet some of you on this. If you're in Chicago, you can get it at the bit.ly/WC Awards 2025, and we'll put that in the show notes. And I'd like to see you there. I'd like to meet some more of our Fight Back Radio listeners. So I hope you can make that. Finally, I want to thank our production team, Vince Olson, Shane Tremley, Dodd McColgan, and I'm Richard Berg for the entire Fight Back Radio team, saying until next time, all power to the people.